White Moonlight returned to the country while pregnant to confront my husband and handed me a divorce agreement. Serena simply wants to register her child, so stop causing any more issues, he arrogantly declared. He doesn't know that I'm also expecting. He said, "Isn't it fine for the three of us to live together? If Serena doesn't mind, why should you? Do you really think you'll find someone better by leaving me?" After some time, he knelt down on a rainy night with regret written on his face, holding onto the hem of my dress, pleading, "Lila, come back. Wasn't our divorce just a ruse? Don't leave me." A week later, after a period of silence, Ezekiel finally appeared. His face was slightly guilty, but his eyes showed clear joy. I could tell he was happy because Serena was back. "Lila, the company took on a new project, and I've been away on business for several days. Please don't be upset. I even brought you your favorite soup dumplings from that place in the south of the city," he said. But what kind of project could make him unreachable for a week? His excuse was awful. The soup dumplings were cold, and reheating them would make them tough, just like Ezekiel, who seemed clueless about Serena's preference for them while I had never liked them. Serena posted many photos of gifts on her social media, one of which showed her caption, "My boyfriend crossed half the city to get me my favorite soup dumplings. How unfortunate they got lost. I might as well feed them to the dog." What's wrong, Lila? Don't you like it?" Ezekiel asked. I shook my head, forcing a smile. "I like it," I said. He breathed a sigh of relief, looking more at ease. "Today is our second wedding anniversary," he continued, and I wanted to tell him I was pregnant. I held the test report tightly, but before I could speak, Ezekiel hesitated. "Lila, I have something to tell you," he said, looking at me with furrowed brows, as if he was facing some difficulty. "This is the divorce agreement. Please sign it." My mind went blank, and after a long silence, I finally found my voice, asking in confusion, "You want to divorce me?" He nodded. "Yeah, Serena's back and she's pregnant." "I can't ignore her." "Is the child yours?" I asked calmly, though the words hit him hard, and he immediately reacted. "Lila, don't project your suspicions onto us. Serena just wants to register her child. So please, stop making a scene." It felt absurd. My husband was leaving me and our child for another woman and her child. Yet he expected me to be understanding. "Can't you forget about her, even though she abandoned you?" I asked, my voice trembling. I knew the answer, but I still held on to a glimmer of hope. "Lila, the one I love is you. It's just that I had a past with Serena, and now she's in trouble. I can't ignore it." He saw me silent and came over to embrace me, gently saying, "Stop it. Once the registration is done, we'll remarry." I bitterly smiled inside. "Stop fooling yourself, Ezekiel. Serena has always been your first choice. I've liked Ezekiel since we were young, but he only had eyes for Serena. Unfortunately, Ezekiel didn't have money, and Serena, unwilling to suffer with him, quickly married someone else and moved abroad. That day, Ezekiel cried and got drunk, with red eyes asking, 'Is it true that no one loves me?' I held him tightly, heartbroken, and softly said, 'That's not true. I will always be with you.' In the 7 years we were together, I supported him through his entrepreneurial struggles, kept him away from drinking, and made hangover soup for him. I took great care of him. Ezekiel did fulfill his promise and became successful in his career. I thought we would continue to live a simple, happy life. But last month, it was revealed that Ezekiel was the illegitimate son of a wealthy businessman. When Serena found out, she returned, and Ezekiel eagerly went to find her. I had always known I was his second choice, but when the truth was so clear, I collapsed. I believed at that moment that if I spoke up, it would only lead to more suffering. I tightly gripped the pregnancy test report, feeling it dampen in my hand. There was no point in bringing it up now. "All right then, let's get a divorce," I said too easily. Ezekiel looked surprised and rubbed his forehead, seeming slightly apologetic. "You can ask for anything, as long as it's not unreasonable. I'll do it. Next week is my birthday. Let's spend my last birthday together," he added, hesitating for a moment. "Are you in such a hurry to be with Serena? You can't wait even a quarter of an hour?" I reminded him about the divorce cooling off period, which lasts for a month. He thought for a moment before agreeing. The next morning, I heard a lot of noise downstairs. When I opened the door, I saw several strangers in the house. Serena was sitting in the dining room, arms crossed, directing them to move things around like she was the hostess. "You move the sofa. You go change the curtains," she ordered. I stepped forward to stop her, but she looked at me for a moment and sneered. I'm about to marry Ezekiel. Didn't he tell you? I'll soon be the mistress of this place. I frowned. We're not divorced yet, and as long as I'm here, you can't meddle in the affairs of this house. The movers exchanged glances and then looked at Serena. She frowned, called Ezekiel, and cried that if I minded, she would stay elsewhere. After hanging up, she glared at me defiantly. Ezekiel hurried back and saw the reproach in my eyes. Serena has just returned and doesn't have a place to stay, so I asked her to stay here, he explained. Can you please stop making all this noise? I said. Am I making noise? Serena snapped. Ezekiel, have you ever respected me? This is my home, and I don't want her here. Ezekiel was momentarily stunned. I had never refused him before, but this was the first time. He spoke softly. Lila, please. Serena's pregnant now and needs rest. She can't be running around. The summer heat made the movers uncomfortable. After thinking it through, I finally agreed. That evening, Serena walked from the bathroom to the living room, wearing my nightgown. Ezekiel saw the transparent fabric on her and felt his throat go dry. He quietly reminded her, Serena, that's Lila's dress. Serena bit her lip, looking remorseful. Lila, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to wear your clothes. This gown looks so nice. I couldn't resist trying it on. It's just a piece of clothing, right? It's fine, isn't it? Lila wouldn't mind, would she? Ezekiel stared at her, then waved his hand dismissively, deciding it wasn't a big deal. If I don't even care about myself, why should it matter if I wear a piece of clothing? I let out a cold laugh and replied, Yeah, if you like it, just take it. That night, I got out of bed to get some water and heard faint sounds coming from the guest room. Serena, stop it. My wife is still here. I know you don't like her anymore. The person you've always liked is me. Why won't you touch me? Serena's voice trembled as she said, Do you find me repulsive? If you do, I might as well die. Tears welled up in her eyes, attempting to stir up sympathy. Ezekiel pulled her into his arms and kissed her. It was truly disgusting. The next morning, I was having breakfast in the dining room when Ezekiel entered with a pleased expression. He saw me and paused for a moment. I knew what was going through his mind. In the past, I would always wake up early to prepare a lavish breakfast for him, even though he hardly ever ate it. I used to do it with great care. How touching I was, I thought to myself with mockery, and decided not to make such foolish efforts anymore. Honey, didn't you prepare breakfast for me today? He asked, leaning in with a sweet tone. I noticed hickeys on his neck and coldly replied, If you want to eat, make it yourself. He instinctively covered his neck and stepped back. Serena came out and saw the situation, glaring at me before casually walking over to fix Ezekiel's tie, making them appear very close. I didn't want to watch them display their affection any longer, so I decided to leave for work. The lawyer had reminded me earlier to visit Ezekiel's company today to go over the property details. While waiting for the elevator, Serena caught up to me. With a provoking tone, she said, Lila, you know about my relationship with Ezekiel. The hickeys on his neck are so obvious. Do you still want to pretend you don't see them? You're pathetic. If I were you, I would have stopped clinging to him long ago and given up being Mrs. Goo. I took a deep breath, trying to stay composed, and stayed silent. Though my tone wasn't harsh, Serena suddenly screamed as if startled and pushed me forcefully. I stumbled backward into a potted plant, causing it to crash to the ground in a messy heap. I fell, feeling dazed amidst the chaos, and after a few moments, a dull pain began to throb in my abdomen. I shook with the pain. Luckily, a kind person helped me up, and I managed to stand. Serena also pretended to fall to the floor, acting as though she was hurt. Serena looked pitiful as the elevator doors opened. Ezekiel rushed over, helped her up, and carefully examined her arms and ankles. When he saw the red marks on her palms from the fall, his eyes reddened. I was about to explain, but he slapped me across the face, then shouted angrily, Serena is pregnant! How could you push her? Lila, you've really disappointed me. The secretary, noticing my injury, reminded him that I was hurt too, and it looked serious. He frowned and barely lifted his eyelids, thinking to himself that she was just pretending. After a moment, he scooped Serena up and rushed her to the hospital. I made my way to the hospital alone, where the doctor scolded me for being careless. The baby was gone. I lay there in a daze on the hospital bed, feeling utterly empty inside. Baby, I'm sorry. Maybe this is the best outcome. A child who wasn't wanted by their parents, might not deserve to be born. I overheard the nurses nearby speaking softly. Miss Serena's husband is handsome, wealthy, and so caring, always holding her close, clearly nervous. If she had waited just a little longer, her injuries would have healed. Truly, a woman who knows how to act cute has it easy. I think you need to choose your husband carefully. Just look at this one. They exchanged sympathetic glances, secretly glancing at me. If they knew that the man they envied actually belonged to me, I wondered what they would think. One of the nurses asked, "Miss Lila, where has your husband gone? There's no one here to take care of you." I gave a self-deprecating smile. I'm a widow. After spending 3 days in the hospital, there wasn't a single call or message from anyone. When I returned home, Ezekiel was attentively giving Serena a shoulder massage and feeding her fruit. When he saw me enter, he complained, "How can someone your age still run away from home?" Serena added with a grin, "Don't say that. Maybe Sister Lila is on a date with another man." This angered Ezekiel, and he shouted at me, "Lila, we're not divorced yet. You're still my wife, so watch your words." I nodded and quietly walked into the bedroom. Ezekiel punched the soft cushion in frustration, looking at me with confusion and surprise. "Lila, why aren't you arguing anymore? You weren't like this before." I turned to look at him, feeling no emotion at all. I had completely given up, and he could no longer make me feel anything. I endured the pain and climbed into bed, falling asleep. When I woke up, Ezekiel was dressed and standing by the bed. "Lila, today's your birthday. I'll be with you," he said gently. I nodded numbly. The day had finally arrived. Once today was over, we would become strangers. On this day, Ezekiel was especially attentive to me, and even woke up early to make me breakfast. Unfortunately, he didn't cook much, and what he made wasn't good. I thanked him, then went outside to feed it to a stray dog. "Where do you want to go?" "Let's go check out the old house." I told Ezekiel that I was taken aback for a moment, then nodded without saying anything. My parents had passed away when I was young, and it was my grandmother who raised me by herself. Before I married Ezekiel, my grandmother was about to leave us. She held my hand tightly and said with concern, "Child, you've suffered." I cried uncontrollably. My grandmother, who had never asked anyone for anything in her life, looked at him through tear-filled eyes and said, "After I'm gone, Lila will be alone. I'm entrusting her to you. You must take good care of her." Ezekiel couldn't refuse the old woman's request and solemnly promised, "Don't worry, I'll never let Lila down." At that moment, everything began to change. When I arrived at the old house, it was not the same as I remembered. The sound of the excavator was deafening, and Serena was pointing at the construction workers in the dusty area. This small house held my childhood memories with my grandmother. It was all that she had left me when she passed away. How could they do this? My anger overwhelmed me, and I shouted at them to stop. Serena finally saw me break down and wore a satisfied smile. Ezekiel told me he wanted to tear the place down and build me a rose garden. "Don't be sad. I'll invite you to come enjoy the flowers once it's finished," he said. I could no longer hold back my tears and grabbed Ezekiel's collar. "Ezekiel, you can't do this. Stop them, quickly." A brief flash of guilt crossed Ezekiel's eyes, but it quickly disappeared, and he remained silent. "Who gave you permission to enter my room?" I rushed over, pushing past Serena, who was blocking my way. She looked like she might fall, and Ezekiel immediately supported her. The cabin suddenly collapsed, and my world fell apart with it. "Lila, don't go too far," Ezekiel shouted. I trembled with anger, my voice as cold as ice. "You all owe me an apology. It's just a house. I'll be reasonable, but stop making such a fuss. I can get you any house you want. Stop acting like it's a big deal." I slapped him hard, watching him walk away. I felt no joy. My heart was filled with sadness. I had once had feelings for such a person. That night, Ezekiel and Serena were truly not home. I packed my things, but just then, Ezekiel unexpectedly returned. I had always been too afraid to speak harshly to him, but today I had slapped him in public. I thought a proud person like him would be furious and decide to sever ties with me. To my surprise, he lowered his head and apologized first, sounding guilty and wronged. "Lila, I know Serena went too far this time, and I apologize on her behalf." At this point, he was still thinking of her, not wanting her to apologize herself. "Ezekiel, would she have done this without your silent approval?" I replied sarcastically. Not all apologies can be forgiven, Ezekiel, but Serena has also made concessions. Can't the three of us live together peacefully? I paused. If Serena doesn't care, why do you? Do you really think you can find someone more suitable after leaving me? It's laughable. Wanting both the moonlight and the red rose, wanting to enjoy the best of both worlds. But there's no such thing. Well, go ahead and be busy, I said in a soft voice. Ezekiel finally seemed to feel some relief. I'll go out for a bit and get you a birthday cake. Let's try to get along better from now on, Lila. He ruffled my hair before turning to leave. After that, there was no more Ezekiel. From now on, I would have to face everything alone. I left the divorce agreement behind and walked out with my suitcase. Today was my 26th birthday, yet it turned out to be the worst birthday I've ever had. Every day from now on would be better than today. I changed my identity, boarded a plane, and took a bus to the mountains of Colorado. Meanwhile, Ezekiel was losing his mind because I had left just a few hours earlier. After dropping Serena off at the villa, she had been holding onto Ezekiel's hand tightly. Ezekiel, you brought me here. Aren't you staying tonight? She said, gently blowing in his ear. Ezekiel felt conflicted, a sense of unease growing inside him. Serena, you're pregnant now, so it's better to rest early. He pushed her away, recalling what had happened that day. He wasn't sure if Lila had forgiven him, and thought it might be better to go home early to comfort her, as he hadn't spent quality time with her in a while. Didn't you say I became more attractive and appealing after getting pregnant? Don't you want to be with me? Serena hooked her arms around his neck to stop him from leaving. Ezekiel hesitated for a moment, then said, No, I need to go back to be with Lila. Her birthday isn't over yet. But his body betrayed him, and he eventually gave in. An hour later, he tidied himself up, bought a cake and soup dumplings from the south of the city, and drove back home. Lila, I bought a cake and your favorite soup dumplings. That's why I'm back so late, he said as he entered. Before he could finish his sentence, something felt off. The house was empty and there was no sign of me. Lila, he called repeatedly, his anxiety growing. Lila, today is our birthday. Come out and let's eat cake together. Don't joke with me. This morning I was wrong. I shouldn't have torn down the cabin your grandma left for us. I can have it rebuilt, I swear. Ezekiel searched the house, noticing that everything felt different. The sofa we had picked out together was gone, and Lila's favorite warm-colored curtains had been replaced with cooler tones. Many things were missing from the villa, including the wedding photos. Ezekiel panicked. Lila had no parents or maternal home. Where could she go? He called a few of my friends, but none had any news. My phone number was disconnected, and all my social media accounts had been deactivated. Ezekiel contacted his assistant, nervously asking where the housekeeper was and where I had gone. The assistant seemed confused, saying, 3 days ago, Madam said she wanted to relax and gave everyone the day off. Ezekiel could hardly believe it. Had I really planned to leave all along? Had I only pretended to agree to the 3-person trip he suggested? During that time, I had been quiet, not wanting to resist due to my disappointment. Ezekiel kept looking at the divorce agreement I had left behind, every word in it seeming so firm and final. She no longer wants to stay with him. Her love for him is gone. Ezekiel began drinking every day to numb his pain, drunkenly calling out Lila's name, his longing clear. Lila, I was wrong. I shouldn't have looked for someone else. I only love you. I regret everything. Please, don't leave me. You can do anything, but I can't live without you. He apologized countless times, but none of his words reached her ears. Lila, we're not divorced yet. We're still married. I will find you. Don't think you can leave me, even if you hate me. Ezekiel appeared to have a plan in mind. His eyes hardened, his breathing quickened as he shouted, We have to find her, no matter what. We'll dig 3 feet into the ground if we have to. We will bring her back. His determination was evident as he searched the entire house for something related to Lila, hoping for a sign, but Lila had ruthlessly discarded everything that connected her to him. At that moment, Serena walked over, a smug expression on her face. She had initially planned to pretend to agree with Ezekiel's request before finding an opportunity to deal with Lila, but to her surprise, Lila had left on her own. Now with Lila gone, the position of Mrs. Gu would likely be hers. Serena pretended to be sad, her eyes red as she comforted him. Maybe Lila just went out to clear her mind. She'll come back once she feels better. Ezekiel, still in denial, responded, Yes, that must be it. Lila loves me so much. How could she abandon me? He tried to convince himself, but deep inside he knew this was just his last attempt to hold on. Lila had once shown him her deep love, making lunch for him, braving the rain to deliver an umbrella, giving him all her savings during his early startup struggles, eating instant noodles with him for an entire year, and even sacrificing her only egg and sausage, lying that she didn't like meat. Lila had truly loved him. She had always been kind and brave, and though she deeply loved him, she had her boundaries and principles. Yet he had shattered all of it with his actions, betraying her trust. Everything around him became blurry, his vision clouded by tears. Suddenly, Ezekiel recalled something Lila had once said. Ezekiel, I love you, but I will not accept betrayal. If you no longer love me, I will disappear from your world. In that moment, Ezekiel hated himself, and he hated Serena. If it hadn't been for her, none of this would have happened. He turned his gaze towards Serena, disgust filling his eyes. Just then, the nanny cautiously handed him a stack of documents, speaking nervously. Sir, these were found in the master bedroom. They must be things left by Madam. Ezekiel's eyes widened in surprise. He had placed all his hope in these documents, thinking they might hold clues to Lila's whereabouts. Ignoring his exhaustion, he eagerly flipped through them, hoping they were a last gift from Lila. However, as he looked, his expression darkened. The photos, revealing and provocative, filled him with anger. Serena certainly knew what these were. They were part of the evidence she used to drive Lila away. Furthermore, Serena had lied, claiming that the child in her womb was Ezekiel's. And how can you even think of becoming Mrs. Gu when you can't even have a child, she had said. The child in my womb is Ezekiel's. We've been together a long time, and this is the result of our love. We're both looking forward to the birth. Ezekiel gripped the documents tightly, his fingers trembling. The last shred of hope in his heart shattered. His anger nearly consumed him. So it was you, Serena, scheming behind the scenes, he muttered, fury in his voice. Serena trembled, fear taking over her, and once again pretended to be pitiful. Ezekiel, I did this because I care about you. It was Lila who insulted me first. I couldn't help but fight back. It's my fault. Please don't be angry. I'm really scared. Ezekiel, the one you love is me. Lila is gone, and I'm here with you. She sobbed softly, trying to appeal to him, but this time, Ezekiel had no sympathy left for her. He stepped forward and seized her by the neck, choking her with his grip. Do you really think I'm that stupid? I've been playing with you. You can never replace Lila. You're not even worth a finger of hers, he spat. It was then that Ezekiel realized the truth. He didn't love Serena. He had only wanted to raise her up, then watch her fall hard, just as she had done to him, making her feel the despair he had once felt. But in doing so, he had been unfair to Lila. The assistant handed Ezekiel further evidence of Serena's wrongdoing, including surveillance footage and a document detailing her schemes. Ezekiel's hands shook with guilt as he processed what he had done over the past month. It turns out we have our own child now, he murmured, his throat tight with emotion. Serena, realizing she had lost all hope, suddenly lost her composure. The light in her eyes faded, and she both laughed and cried, Ezekiel, you're so foolish. You killed your own child for my baby. How does that feel? I curse you. May you never find true love. Serena's emotions spiraled out of control, and in her wild state, she accidentally fell down the stairs, blood pouring from her leg. Help me, Ezekiel! Save my child, she pleaded, but Ezekiel merely looked at her coldly, refusing to let anyone assist her. After she lost the child, she was cast out of the villa on the coldest snowy night in New York, left homeless for the last 6 months. Ezekiel has been desperately searching for her, but it's as if Lila has vanished from the earth, as though she never existed. If it weren't for a few cherished photos on my phone, Ezekiel might have thought it was all a mere dream. Meanwhile, I'm teaching in a small village in Colorado, having majored in education with the dream of one day imparting knowledge to children. Finn and I were instructing physical education to the students. Finn, who holds a mathematics degree from a prestigious university, decided to return to his hometown and teach. At 22, he is tall, radiating a bright, youthful energy. He reached out to grab me, but stopped when he saw Finn in front of me. Who are you? How dare you block me? Lila is my wife, and I'm here to take her home. Ezekiel's powerful presence intimidated the children nearby, causing them to cry. Sister Lila seems to dislike you. Please leave, Finn said, aware of how difficult this man could be, though still politely asking him to go. He gave me a glance, and I hurriedly escorted the frightened children back to the classroom. A few brave kids rushed forward to shield me, like chicks protecting their mother. You bad guy, you're a bad person. Don't bully Teacher Lila. Their words made me feel deeply moved. It was comforting to know that there are still people in this world who care about me without condition and wish for my well-being. Ezekiel stood outside all night, refusing to leave, even in the pouring rain. By the third day, he was burning with fever and unconscious, muttering, Lila, I'm sorry, I was wrong. The medical conditions in the mountains were poor, and Ezekiel could no longer endure. His assistant anxiously found me, urging me to visit him. Ezekiel's body had reached its limits. He had always struggled with stomach problems, and for the last 6 months, he hadn't given up on searching for me. He had pushed himself, squeezing in brief moments of rest while staying busy all day long. Miss Lila, as an outsider, I must say Ezekiel only has you in his heart. He drove Miss Serena away long ago and never considered leaving you, the assistant said. Upon hearing this, I felt no change in my heart. Concern now seemed unnecessary. The most pointless thing in the world is a late apology and a passionate gesture after the heart has cooled. I didn't want to see him, but he was affecting my work. He quietly stood outside the classroom while the children peeked at him curiously. Unable to hold back, I walked outside, filled with frustration. Ezekiel, we're no longer together. I don't love you anymore. It seemed as though he didn't hear me, his eyes full of surprise. Lila, you finally want to talk to me? He asked, his nervousness clear. Even though he had prepared for this moment countless times in his mind, he still stammered. Lila, it's my fault. All my fault. I shouldn't have let Serena get close to me. She was punished and I drove her away. Please forgive me, I can explain. I don't love her. I only allowed her to be near me to get back at her for abandoning me. You can scold me, even hit me, but please don't leave me. He pleaded desperately. I gave him a faint smile and said, Okay, I forgive you. His shock was immediate, but before he could smile, my words struck him like cold water. I don't care about you, so I don't care about what you've done. I also despise revenge and entanglement. This relationship has exhausted me, so I choose to let go. I've already forgiven you. Wasn't that what you wanted? If you're satisfied, then let it end here. Whether it's nostalgia for the past or the bitterness from being hurt, it should all come to an end. A broken mirror cannot be repaired. Without looking back, I walked away, feeling no regret. Ezekiel stood there, dazed, but he didn't give up. He stubbornly remained outside my door. It wasn't until the stock prices of Ezekiel Group plummeted and the board of shareholders expressed their anger that he reluctantly left and returned to New York. Lila, wait for me. I'll come back to be with you once I finish my work. Do you have a problem? Go back and be your CEO. Let's go our separate ways now, Lila. The only place that feels like home is where you are. I won't give up. Talking to Ezekiel was truly futile. I had decided not to communicate with him anymore. How could I get rid of Ezekiel? Should I run away again? But no matter where I went, he could always find me. Just when I was struggling with my thoughts, Finn entered, offering a gentle smile and a warm tone. Instantly, he seemed to see through my worries. Sis, I know what you're thinking. Why don't we put on a show? His suggestion seemed unreliable. But when I looked into his bright, clear eyes, I surprisingly nodded. During this time, Ezekiel Group faced numerous challenges, both external attacks from competitors and internal family members, vying for his position. Ezekiel was extremely busy and finally managed to resolve all the issues within a month. With no time for rest, he rushed to catch a red-eye flight, making multiple transfers before finally returning to the mountains. When he saw Finn and me happily chatting, his eyes flared with anger. His hands clenched, and his eyes turned red. Lila, what are you doing? His face was clouded with a terrifying glare, and jealousy made him lose control. As you can see, we're together, I lied without hesitation. The color completely drained from his face, and he collapsed emotionally. He got into a scuffle with Finn, who, being gentle and not skilled at fighting, couldn't match Ezekiel's intensity, especially since Ezekiel hadn't been resting well lately. Neither of them had the upper hand, and both sustained injuries. I quickly checked on Finn's wounds, avoiding looking at Ezekiel. Finn appeared extremely pale, with red eyes, and his expression was unusual. Lila, You really are heartless, Ezekiel said, leaving with a look of disappointment. As he departed, he donated a large sum to the village for road repairs and the construction of a Hope primary school. After returning, his life revolved entirely around work, and under his leadership, Ezekiel Group flourished. When Lila was still with him, Ezekiel was generally gentle and would occasionally smile. However, now he seemed distant and rarely smiled. The only time a smile would appear was when he made his annual donations to the Hope Primary School and saw Lila's name on the receipt. To avoid pressure from his family to marry, he adopted a child and raised them well. 2 decades later, Ezekiel traveled alone to the village where Lila once lived. Much had changed over the years. The once run-down primary school had been renovated and now looked beautiful and elegant. A little girl, upon hearing that he was searching for Lila, eagerly said, "I know where my mom is. I'll take you there." But when Ezekiel heard that, he ran away, no longer able to face her. He knew that she had a new family and children and had built a new life for herself, while he remained stuck in the past, fixated on what had happened over 20 years ago. When he later found out that the children at the school all called her Mom, he never tried to see her again.